Well, hello, I hope, and welcome along to another 506 podcast episode, The Nearly Men, and part of the Marvel Appreciation Society. Apologies if I'm a little choppy with my internet. I'm not quite sure. But if I am, I'll jump off and jump back on my phone. I want to crack straight on and welcome Johnny. How you doing?
Hello.
Wow, it's good to see you. Where are you?
You too. Good to see you too. I'm at home. I've got it's looks like a dark room, doesn't it, with this light? Um, but yeah, Sunday afternoon.
Where are you? Where
Oh, I'm at home. I live in Derbyshire, so I'm at home
you
in
live in
Derbyshire.
Derbyshire?
Yeah, I'm from Sheffield originally, and then lived in London for a bit, and now I'm in Derbyshire.
Okay, okay. You're a West Yorkshire lad, aren't you?
South. So
South Yorkshire. Okay.
yeah, you'll have to excuse my accent.
Don't worry, I'm from North Yorkshire.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
Local.
That
we're a
old
little jaded.
rivalry. Is that
Yeah,
Yeah, there's no rivalry between us. It's just Lancastrians we can't stand.
that's it. Red rose, white rose, and all that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And Cockneys, Doug, can't stand you either.
yeah, no one can stand us. Yeah.
um, hang on. Sorry, I do apologise. I had a hilarious anecdote, but apparently I've written in pencil and it's not there anymore. So
Oh,
let's crack straight on because of this. What I've learned from speaking to you guys, thank you so much for all coming on, is that perhaps that you learned more about the guy that you played almost after the show. Is that the case with you as well?
yeah, I think so.
Helping.
I think I was lucky that on the 100th Bomb Group website they had the diary of Bill,
Yeah.
my character. Um, so I sort of had that as a point of reference for the mission to Munster, which was in episode 5. So I'd got that as
Yes.
a reference, but in terms of actual him as a person and portraying that character, there wasn't much there at all. It was more about the sort of the action in the plane. So I was
Yes.
lucky because I'd got something. But yeah, we're all on a bit of a journey afterwards, actually, and sort of rediscovering who these guys are. Um, so yeah, that's basically what I had.
Yeah. Have you spoken with Matt? Have you?
Yeah, we've
Just
had a
he
good
seems to.
yeah, we've had a good catch up over WhatsApp about various bits and bobs, and Matt seems to have been on a bit of a journey himself, trying to help me find more information. So yeah,
What have you learned the most?
Say
sorry.
that say that again, Matt, because you're
Uh,
chopping in and out a lot.
what have you learned that surprised you the most?
Um, so we we discussed about his family. Um, he had a daughter. That's correct, Matt, isn't it?
Yeah,
A
that's correct.
daughter that passed away age 6,
Oh no,
6 years
God.
old, which is obviously horrific for anyone ever, but especially someone like when you think about what he went through in terms of in the plane and the war, and then for that to happen as well. And then we've sort of discovered that to me, he seems very elusive, um, sort of very private, and it's quite difficult to get any information on him. But Matt was saying, you can help me more here, Matt, but he was saying sort of that a stroke of fate or a bit of luck brought him back together with Rosie and the crew. And I think there's a photo of them at some sort of reunion. I think it's a 100th Bomb Group, one of your events or something, but they're back together. They probably look 70s, I'd say 70s, 80s, maybe. Um, of them back together, and it's quite a nice loop. It's sort of nice to know that actually they found each other again at the end.
Was that quite? This is a question for Matt May. Was that quite common? Did a lot of the 100th Bond Group not do the reunion straight away? Did it take several years or even decades for some of the old crews to essentially come back together again, or was this something that was really well supported right from the beginning?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we take it for granted in this day and age where you can like just look somebody up on Facebook. But back in the day, it could be as simple as like Bill may well have just like lost somebody's address. And a lot of these guys had been searching, some guys intentionally, you just didn't have a desire to go to reunions. But some guys, like in Bill's case, it breaks my heart. Like Bill wrote a thing in the 80s and said for 40 years he'd been trying to find his guys and, he couldn't do it. And it makes you sad just thinking about that. Here's a guy who's trying to find his crew and he can't do it. But in the era of like looking people up in the telephone book, it's pretty hard. And Bill moved around the country a lot and was stayed in the service for 20 years after that. So it's hard. But yeah, Johnny had said a stroke of fate. I think Bill had seen something like an article written about Rosie and it mentioned him living in New York. And so Rosie was the first one that Bill managed to connect to. And then, like that, Bill came to a couple of the reunions in the 80s and you can see from the photo like the guy's like all smiles, so you can only imagine like what it meant to him to know that like there actually are reunions and then like here's like 5 of the other guys that are here with him. So I'm sure it was like a moment of healing for Bill as well.
When did
Matt,
these? Another question for you, Matt. When
Yeah.
did these reunions actually start? I mean, was it a phenomenon that started in the 70s or 80s? I mean, did it take that long, or were there a lot of these associations, related to their, particular squadrons or particular battle groups or whatever it is they were? Had they been going on since the 50s or the 60s, or when did that sort of phenomenon of the reunion really sort of come about?
Yeah, I'd say it's much like the case with like the guys from Easy Company. They had their first reunion in 46 when a lot of these guys were still in the service. They kind of just got together here in the Washington, D.C. area. And then pretty much every 2 years after that, they've literally kept it like every 2 years since the beginning. So every 2 years they've done it. I think the biggest one they ever had is in the early 80s in Long Beach, California. They had 1,000 people there. And that was before you had like friends and followers coming. That was 1,000 people of just like a veteran and a spouse. So you probably had 400 or 500 veterans there, which is, I mean, just staggering.
Yeah, that's crazy. Johnny, could you tell us a little bit about the auditioning process? Because obviously it's a big project, and we've known from talking to some of the other guys that obviously it had a code name, Whirlwind, and so not everyone really. Did you realize straight on what you were going up for, and how many times did you always read for the character that you played?
Yeah, I always read for Bill. I read versions of scripts with Bill's name there, probably just over other characters, just to get a sense of, give it some color and some variations. But yeah, I always read for Bill. It was quite funny actually. I was on holiday. It's like that every actor, nothing happens and then you go on holiday and then your phone rings.
Kicks off.
Yeah. So I got a phone call obviously from my agent and scripts sent through, but because I was on holiday, I think it helped in a way because it sort of took the pressure off me a little bit because I was, like I got to a point where I was sort of like take the pressure away from the names and the project and just play the part.
Yeah.
Just play the role and then sort of forget about it because you're on holiday. So I remember taping for it and did 2 or 3 versions. I was on for quite a while because it was on Zoom because I was on holiday. So it was meeting like this. I've come full circle now. So I taped for ages and I didn't hear anything for about 6-7 weeks, I think. I was in the dentist in the chair and my phone rang a couple of times and then I came out of the dentist. So I was like, I've 3 missed calls. So called my agent and everything. And they were like, oh, the Spielberg gig, don't cut your hair because you've got the job. I was like, wow, I couldn't believe it. Like, because it was still roughly around COVID-y times. So in terms of like hair, I just shaved mine off like every lad in Britain did. Chopped it off to avoid having to sort of look a mess. So I remember just saying, don't cut your hair.
You'd already cut it.
Yeah, I'd cut it, and then I was like, luckily I've got quite a thick, sort of mop affair. So by the time we got to shooting, through boot camp and everything, I'd got it back. But yeah, it was a weird one, really. I think being on holiday helped.
How long was it before the start? Then when you got the job to when you actually went to boot camp? Was it
Only about a week and a bit, a week
Oh, really?
and a half,
So
I think. Yeah, a
you're
week.
quite late.
Yeah, so obviously with Rosie coming in later to the series, I think everything was like up and running like a well-oiled machine by then. But we got a decent boot camp. We had a good, I think, like me and Ian and some of the other lads in Rosie's crew, we got a good week and a bit, like intensive, sort of 8 till 5, 8 till 6 every day. It's a long time, really, when you sort of, in one room.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it all came around.
Excellent.
And sorry, am I back? Hopefully, I'm back.
You are back, Matthew. Yeah.
Back.
So we just spoke about the auditioning process, and now, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So you were he was a tail gunner, am I correct?
Yes, in the tail.
In the tail. So you did training on that yourself?
Yeah. So we had flight training, but so the thing with the tail is it's so small and crammed in. You've got to think you're right down in the end, like above the, the tail plane and everything. So you've got the back wheel of the aircraft comes up into the belly. So you've sort of got the arch of the wheel. So you climb over that, and then you go through a gap. I'd say probably like a shoebox or 2 shoeboxes together, like a square. Climb through that. Then when you get through that, you've got a bicycle seat, a push bike seat, with 2 sort of wooden knee pads either side.
Wow.
So you're on your knees on the bike seat, and then in front of you, you've got an M2 Browning machine gun with your triggers like that, and then either side, literally just oxygen, phone, all the buttons. When Riley was saying about when you're in there from They'll Die, basically saying once you're in there, we can't help you. So you've got to kind of be trained as to what, because you see these guys, obviously they had so much training. For it to be realistic for us, we'd know exactly what button to press, exactly how to swap your oxygen and how to talk to the pilot. And so it was all training like that for when you're actually in there, because once you're in there, it's literally like a box like that. So you just sort of pop your head up above the glass, and then you've got sort of a metal plate here, a defense plate, and then you're wearing the flak. So pretty much a couple of sheets of steel in front of the gun.
Oh, that sounds really painful. What was the longest stint you had to spend in there without getting out of the tail to go to the bathroom or have a drink or something?
Probably over at least 2 and a bit hours, up to 3 hours, I'd say. Probably longer. When what happened is obviously Josh was saying about what seemed like a panic attack, but it was like just overheating. I got eventually, I think it was the first day using that sort of piece of equipment. So what happens is they separated the plane into chunks, and used that bit on the volume. So on where they were filming indoors with the screens and everything. So we got just like the tailpiece sat on a plinth. By the end, we had like cooling systems going into the piece of kit. But on day 1, when I went in there to first shoot the bit with the flak that's in episode 5 that he sort of gets in the back of the leg and all the screaming and everything, we went in there, and there was like no cooling system or anything. We had it in the suits with the ice and stuff that they tried to shove in. I remember sitting in there and just thinking, it's warm, like it's very warm after about 5 minutes. They have these, sorry, I'm ranting now, but they have these they're called like squibs. So, well, you'll know, but
yeah, of course, yeah.
Like your little explosive explosive and blood bags and everything. With it being so tight in there, by the time I got in there, they had to sort of set it up in situ.
Yeah.
So obviously I've got a suit on designed for -10 above, like up in altitude, above 10,000 feet, you know, free, like everything on full gear, sat in the tail. And then it was like, in terms of, by the time they'd set that up and wired everything up and got everything together, by the time you're about to shoot the first scene, I'm in there for like an hour already. So my heart rate's gone up anyway. Like I'm sort of sweating a little bit around because I've got the mask on.
Yeah.
And then the flight cap, I got like things in my ears to stop the, you know, the explosives from death, because it's in a tube. So obviously, any sound was. So I'm sort of sat there, and then they clip the camera in behind you. So it sort of became this sort of box of like, that's me now for the next whatever. So by the time we'd done the shooting, he'd been shot. So obviously my heart rate's going. I was like, but after that take, I just had to move. I had to come out. I just fell out.
Right.
I just literally flopped out like a salmon.
Wow.
And yeah, they were like, oh, he's had a, you know how it is. They were like, oh, he's had a panic attack. He's stressed. It's all kicking off. I was like, no, I just feel like I'm gonna die if I don't have 10 minutes in between. Do you know what I mean? In terms of needing the toilet and stuff, I didn't need it. I was that hot. It's like, yeah, I just couldn't wee. You know, drinking water, it was just disappearing. It was such a strange experience, but it was brilliant because obviously it really helped actually with a lot of the acting. Because I thought it's physically happening to me. When you read like what happens in Shock, about clammy skin and sweating and all that, it was physically happening. So from an acting point of view, I thought that's great because there's a lot of physical things already happening, and you go into that sort of zone of just running with it, don't you? I was like, they'll get something.
Wow.
They'll get something real. How
I'm quite sure what it is, but they'll get something.
How tall are you?
I am 6'1".
Oh my word!
And I'm about
like a 5'2".
No, I know. Yeah, that I remember. On day one, sort of people looking at me, being like, "He's tall."
He's a big man.
Yeah, and then obviously, I'm around. I don't know what it is in kilograms, but probably I'm about 14 stone.
Yeah.
So in weight. So when you add the suit on, I sort of doubled in width.
Yeah.
So getting into like the shoebox hole, and then climbing over the wheel and everything, I was like, so once I was in there, I couldn't really turn around. It was just kind of fixed in. Yeah, and then
that sounds like the most intense position in the whole crew. From
to imagine
different parts, whether they're co-pilots, navigators, waste gunners,
and to imagine what they actually went through, you know, to be in that, I know obviously back then a lot of guys were smaller anyway, like naturally you see it, don't you, like the old pubs with like small doors and low roofs and stuff, like people were just generally, I think, smaller, but to think as well, those guys in the tail, you're flying backwards. So you know what it's like on a train when you sort of sat backwards, or you know, to be down there, and the distance between sort of your waist gunner and the tail, it's quite a distance. You know, you think a full aircraft. Like when you go on holiday, how many people are on a plane? The distance between you, sort of, is very remote. You know, it's kind of like you're just down there, and flying backwards. Just something got in there. I thought, oh.
Got a question for Matt. Maybe were tail gunners a kind of a special breed? You know, were they kind of different from the rest of the crew? Because it sounds from what Johnny was just describing, it sounds like a hellish position to be stuck in for a 12-hour mission or whatever it might have been, or a 10, or however long they're up there for.
Or
were they kind of different from the rest of the crew?
I
Yeah,
think
they've done something wrong.
you get guys that are assigned to like the ball turret or the tail that when they tell people about it, it's like, oh my God, you were in the ball turret, you were in the tail. But some of the most like unassuming guys I've ever met held those positions. And sometimes you actually can have a fairly tall guy in those because the thing is back then people might have been tall, but they weren't like built like a American football player. They were like tall and lanky. So you had guys that literally had their knees like scrunched up like this, but they were tall and lanky and could do it. But you're right. There is like I think with the tail and the ball turret, there's a you're not in there at the beginning of the mission. You go in there when you're getting close to enemy territory, but there's a sense of isolation to it. You know that you're on your own back there. But it's certainly takes a fair amount of bravery to get back there and in that position.
Not something I would want.
And how long were they in there for?
I mean, a typical mission is probably around 8 hours. So, you're not going to be in there at the takeoff part and you're not going to be at the landing. But I mean, you hear even what Johnny said about like being in there 2 hours, which those guys would have done. It's intense. So, I mean, they were sweating too. It's just the oddity is like these guys where it wasn't 1,000 degrees, they were still sweating, but it was like freezing on them as they're doing it. So it puts your body through a physical process like that's probably just hard to imagine.
Yeah.
And aware of the fact that you could so easily get stuck in there. I mean, we see it in the show a couple of times where the guys get stuck and there's nothing anybody can do to get them out. I mean, you do a couple of missions and something goes slightly mechanically wrong or whatever, maybe you live through it. How are they getting back in there?
It's hard. I mean, even I'd be curious of Johnny's perspective from like episode 5, like you're wounded in the tail and then you quickly try to like make your way out of like it's not an easy place to make your way out of quickly, especially if you're wounded and maybe in like not necessarily a state of panic, but just in like a state of shock of like, oh my God, I've been wounded. Like, I mean, try to get out of here quickly.
That's the thing. I think some was Munster number 3 on Rosie's mission list or something. So quite early on in terms of his 50 that he completed. So psychologically, what that does to you, I know it showed. They do show it in the series in terms of when it's like if you fall off a horse or fall off a motorbike or something. I presume the best thing to do is kind of get back on the bike. So I guess it was a sort of a duty to do so. But yeah, it takes like a part of you, when you're in that small confined space. There's so many hazards. That's the problem, you see. But Bill in that situation there, if he doesn't sort of use the medical equipment and climb through the plane and sort himself out, it's detriment to himself and also to the rest of the crew for that mission. Because you sort of, for me anyway, the way I approached it, well, I think in Rosie's crew approached it is you're looking after each other. You're just trying to get your plane back. The bigger picture of what you're doing and who you're fighting against and all that almost goes out of the window when there's 10 of you just trying to get it. You're just trying to get it back. Drop your bombs and it's turned and there's people shooting at you, people trying to kill you. If you take your gloves off, your hands would freeze because it's just freezing cold up there, or there's guys on board that are severely injured or even dead that are your friends. It becomes that 8-hour mission is once you've dropped the bombs and turned, it's that psychological thing of like, we just got to get back. We just need to get back on this one.
Yeah, it's only half done, isn't it? And
you got to get,
of course, once they do drop the bombs, it's a sitting duck because it's it's such a big aircraft with 10 guys on it. So yeah, for me, it was just like that. It was just like you sort of switch. You just think, I just need to stay alive for the next 20 minutes, then 20 minutes after that, then 20 minutes after that, and suddenly. But then I think as well that there's no. So like you were saying earlier about losing contact with people, there was no sort of internet or like mobile phone or anything else to do. So those guys were literally a team. It was like, if you're going, well, I'm going. I'm not going to sit here and let you go. It's like they became the riveters, those 10 guys, are like really are brothers, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like any sort of warfare. It's a funny thing. It's there's so many like layers to it, right?
Yeah. After you had after you sort of pulled out of the ball turret, when you sort of had that sort of it affected you so badly you couldn't be in there again. How did you psychologically sort of? I've got to do this, obviously. How are you coping with the claustrophobia and everything? Because I mean, it's a similar thing, isn't it? How are these guys putting themselves in some transcendental state that they could be in that horrible claustrophobic? Let alone when the fighter interceptors come flying in as well. They actually have to do your job.
Yeah.
Like, were you asking yourself those questions when you were in there? Like, geez, how would we do this? How am I not just? I am incredibly claustrophobic as a human being. I couldn't. There's no way. I don't think I could even be on a B-17, let alone in the ball turret. Do you know what I mean? Like, how were you asking yourself those questions? Were you sort of like playing that game? Like, how am I getting through?
I think the key thing to do with it is to sort of make friends with it.
Right.
Sort of when you sat in there for a long period of time, either in between shooting or in between sort of anything, just a quick turnaround or a quick costume check or anything, you find yourself sat there and you think, if I don't make friends with this space, it becomes a problem, doesn't it? Because you're like, you sort of, I can imagine the PTSD. Yeah, I know. Like in Bill's diary, he was saying like in sort of down in the tail, what he could see and who he'd shot down and all that sort of stuff. But I remember him just saying that it's like that's your space. You're checking in with people all the time on you've got like a phone around the neck. Yeah. But again, even that, I mean, if your oxygen failed down there, when they call to you, you could have guys slumped over guns and stuff. They've passed out. So, like, if you don't make friends with the space, and try and just operate things down there, I could imagine that people would go mad. I know in the diary he said, like, I've not had a flashback for whatever 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. And I don't think he wrote the diary until he was close to sort of passing away, right? So, it's a long-lasting effect.
Yeah, no kidding. And Matt, so maybe a question for you, maybe you know this, maybe you don't. I never considered this. Johnny pointed it out. It's a very good point that you're flying backwards. So he's flying backwards, and then the interceptors are coming in. Is there a different technique to try and engage the enemy? Because it must be quite disorientating.
I think it's the same technique. I actually, the way Johnny said it's probably a good way of thinking about it, because we often see where like tail gunners and ball turret gunners get questions of like, how did you do that? And it's exactly, they didn't use that phrase that you did, but I think it's exactly that, like make the space, your friend, like familiarize, like you just become accustomed to it. But I mean, it is tough because as Bill describes, like he undertook a lot of action. You get a lot of attacks from that direction. And I think to like mention what Bill said again, like Bill in his diary says, like, I can't speak for what else was going on because like there was so much going on where I'm at. Like I can only speak from my perspective because like you don't even have time to crane around and check on everybody else. Like you're literally in your own space back there, trying to hold it down. And I think what's pretty wild, just as a testament to like Bill's character, is during the course of writing about what was going on, not once does Bill mention actually getting wounded. Like that was like a secondary thing for him. I mean, that just tells you that like he literally just writes about like I was in the zone doing my job.
Yeah.
He writes almost like it's a sports game. He's like a guy went to the right, but I didn't quite follow his plight because I was too focused on this guy. And it's almost like it becomes like almost like a like a horse race commentator. This is happening, that's happening. One of the things, just while we're on, because I'll forget, with so obviously we had the screens that they would fly sort of a 109 or Messerschmitt or whatever into this screen.
Yeah.
Now, your initial reaction when that happens is to, because it's quick and it's coming at you. One of the things that Bill said in the diary was because you sort of got the burst of 3 on the gun without it jamming or timing your distances. You almost had to wait for the plane to get into range. So what that is psychologically, to sit there on a bike seat with a gun and seeing it coming towards you,
firing at you,
timing it. You sat there in, like, you know, the flak vest and shoulders are exposed. You know, you're just waiting. You're just literally going head on with a 109 aircraft. You're sat on a bike seat in a piece of tin. Literally, it feels like a tin of beans with engines on it. You know, it's storing the bombs, and there's not much to it at all when you're in there. And you think, I can't imagine the speed. Do you know what I mean? It'd feel like, to me, somebody driving a motorbike towards you at like 100 mile an hour and just standing there till the last second and then stepping aside. Like, that's all I can put it to. But he writes that in his diary about sort of timing it and not wasting bullets, because if you jam or you get it wrong, they win, don't they? Because they've got the bullets.
Could you clear a jam effectively in your own weapon there? Is there enough room to do that?
You could do, yeah. That is one of the advantages, actually, because you've got you've got a piece of metal, and then the gun's the other side of it. The actual space is down there. You couldn't fit a human in there, but the gun space and the bullets and cartridges are everywhere. So that is one advantage that you've got. You've actually got space that if you needed to lift it and but I don't know. I mean, I've seen pictures of B-17s coming back with like no tail, just like blown off, or like bits blown off. And I just think, like, if they hit anything around there, you've got that. It's like, if anything hits or anything's damaged, I don't know. I literally don't. I don't know whether you just have to move positions. Surely it'd just be a write-off because there's just nothing in there.
Yeah.
Wow. That's how tiny. It's like getting into like a wheelie bin.
Yeah.
And it's like climbing in one of those, and that's it. Shutting the lid. That's your space.
Yeah.
Good Lord. And you've got to hope the landing gear comes down as well.
Yeah. I've heard, but I don't know if it's true, Matt. But there was stories saying about, like, sort of, if a ball turret fixed or locked, that they might have to land with the guy in there.
Yeah, there's a long-running story about I think there's a story called "Death of a Ball Turret Gunner," and there's some dispute over which group that happened to. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly a spot where, even if it didn't come to like a crash landing, as you said, it's a extremely vulnerable position, and it's one where you may have gotten stuck. It's like extremely hard to get out of, especially if you're having to. I mean, landing's one thing, but especially if, like, they hit the bailout alarm and you're trying to get out of there quickly, it's a really, really tricky spot to get out of.
Yeah, what was the bailout procedure? What did you have to do, Johnny, if you would have to bail out? Do you have to go back into the aircraft, essentially, and then crawl up to around the waist before you can get?
Yeah. So you've got to get back up the plane over the I know I keep referencing the back wheel, but it's a big piece of kit that's sort of blocking your path. So to get up there, like as shown in episode 5 with the tourniquet and the medical kit, everything is up that end, because you're so far down. So in terms of bailout, because you were protected, so I had sort of a glass canopy above my head, so there's no hatch that way, not on the version we had anyway in the thing. So it was a case of turning and trying to crawl back up there.
How long would that take in real terms? What was the quickest time you did that in?
It's not overly long. It's probably like 5 to 8 seconds if you really want to just do it on a flat. But if a B-17's crashing and G-force and things moving around it, I don't think you'd be doing that. I think it'd be sort of luck of the draw whether you could whether you could pull yourself up into that position.
I have a question. So did Dale Dye do any of the training for you in the turret gun? Did he get in there?
He didn't get in there with me. We had the little glass window, so he'd just pop his head through here and thing. But we had quite intensive like ammunition training.
Right.
That's where I got like real respect for him, because all the guys like were on day one of gun training were all sort of nervous and like all a bit like, oh no, like ear defenders, and I'm a bit nervous. Captain Dye was just like, no drama, no ear defenders. He was stood next to the thing, you know, flicking it, reloading it, and just making it look so easy. And I thought, yeah, he's like proper. He's been there and done it. But yeah, they gave us extensive training on sort of blockages and clearing jams and stuff, which is good actually, because let's say you are rolling on a take and something happens like that, it's good to just keep that footage, just have it organic, just to see what, you know, like the whole me getting hotter and overheating and everything, it all adds to the, if you look at the footage back there, if you rewatch it now I've explained that, you'll see my eyes, they're like grey here, like sort of grey bags underneath, and it just formed over time. But when you look at it on the camera, it looks amazing. You know, it just looks like bang on exactly how it would have been. You can see the sweat all here when I've been severely injured, you know. So yeah, those little aspects to it, I think, keep the rawness and keep the sort of truth.
So was there any time that you were rolling and it jammed and you had to like unjam it, or was there any?
Yeah, there's loads, because obviously we had the blanks and we had, you know, the guns work, so that, you know, you do it and you think, oh, I've done it wrong. You know, it's not a burst of 3 that I've done 5 and it's jammed, and so you're pulling things around, and then cartridges are shooting off and you get the noise of them dropping around you, and then they're still flying planes into you. So you're thinking, what would I've, you know, where would I be? There's so many things to think about. Huge respect to the guys who did it. I mean,
but it helps for performance wise, because you've got so much going on. You just got to do the job, and it kind of does the performance for you, because you don't have time to think, really. Is it? It's just.
I remember like on cut thinking, well, I'm not quite sure there whether I actually, you know, like you almost need to watch it back to think where's my angles at and what but there's that much going off, it adds to that chaoticness of it, and you'll see as they jump around the plane, everyone's in that chaotic so you get like that camera shake, and
Is that thing they say with acting that, you know, just learn your lines and don't bump into the furniture, but with this, like, bumping into the furniture kind of works, doesn't it?
That's the thing, it's such a funny one, because like in a scene like that, there is lines later on, but in the actual getting shot, there's no lines, is there? So in terms of a script, you don't get anything. You just get, you know, DeBlassio hitting the tail or injury to you just get a line. So then you think, right, you've got to then dress that up, because there is no lines, is there? Like you say, you're relying on the chaos around you, you're relying on sort of the situation to give something to, you know, because then you forget as well that actually it is a camera, you are telling a story, so you've got to try and marry the two, which not easy, but hopefully it turned out all right.
You know it turned out all right.
It's hard when you watch yourself, innit? You think, oh,
no one likes watching themselves, Johnny. I'm not alone.
So was there ever a temptation with you to be like, I'm sorry, Dale, I'm not getting it today. Do you mind getting in?
Yeah, do you want to do it instead?
And then
that's the thing.
And walking off for like 3 hours and leaving him in there.
Yeah, it's too much health and safety for that. Everything's, you know, when you're in there, everyone knows you're in there.
Yeah. Do you have any Dale Dye stories? A funny Dale Dye story?
I just remember one. He used to call me a ham sandwich. I don't know why. He's like, "You ham sandwich," and I get it wrong. Yeah, when you're in there, you ham sandwich. I just remember one time with the gunner training. So we did training on, you know, the call signals. So 5 o'clock high, or like 3 o'clock low, or whatever. And he'd call them out, and then you had to turn the gun to the position that would be. So it's just like these repetitive cycles of doing that. So then if you did hear anything when you was in the plane and the bombs are going off and everything, you could go, right, it's 6 o'clock low, so I know that definitely at this point I'd be there. you know, that position wise. I remember like on the last session of it, we all went in and he said, you need to wear these this time. And they were like ear defenders. I couldn't hear him. It turned my ears off. So then he was like shouting. I was like looking at him going, no, I can't hear it. And luckily I did 3 and I got all 3 right. It was an actual miracle. But he came up to me after and shook my hand and said, well done there. You didn't miss a beat. But I thought, he got me as well. Last minute ear defenders. I just thought I'll just be good and listen to him. You know, he's important. And I thought they were earphones, you know, the ones that the sort of navigators wear, but they were completely blocked.
Wow.
So he'd stitched me up. But I thought, you know, he chose me to do it, so he must have liked me.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
Seemed like a nice.
How long did it take you to be able to sort of like get that sort of 6 o'clock high, 5 o'clock low, just like wrote?
Yeah, a while. Like you'd miss a few, but like I say, with boot camp, we were quite intense. We were there a lot. We were there for hours. And I know you said like, so like for Band of Brothers, yours was more like physical and running around and all that sort of military stuff on the ground. Whereas with the air, there was a lot of sort of, you know,
technical debriefs.
Yeah, meticulous sort of training as to getting it, you know, because it's so accurate, isn't it, to drop a bomb or to fly, you know, fly an aircraft or a group of aircraft together at a certain distance and get it right. That there was a lot of that. You know, you look at the navigators and they've got like a pencil and a ruler. You know, there's no sort of high-tech radar system or, you know, internet or anything. It's sort of just these guys with a load of bombs trying the best to get them onto a precision target. So you'd see like pilots, I think this is right, Matt, but like pilots would be sort of university students or like quite, you know, clever.
Top, did you have to go to university to become a pilot even back then, Matt, or did you just have to, you know, how did they choose the selection for the pilot and the co-pilot and the navigator? I'd assume would be equally as challenging.
Yeah, there were early on, yeah, especially you did have to have some college and take the exam to see if you pass. And there were a lot of guys who will admit, like, hey, I wanted to be a pilot and I didn't pass it. I washed out, so I became a bombardier. So not to make it seem like the bombardier is like a, you know, second fiddle kind of thing, but there were some guys who fell into that from like a secondary perspective. But yeah, you did have to have some smarts and judgment. I'm sure some kind of additional education helped, but I think a lot of it just comes down to, you know, logic and judgment, to be honest with you.
But I think they kind of still do that in effect, don't they? Because if you're going to train to be a pilot in the Air Force, you know, depends what machinery, like if you're the top, then you're landing fighter jets on an aircraft carrier. But if you're not as good, then you're flying transport planes or AWACS planes or Hercules, or do you know what I mean? I wonder, they must still have that kind of process where they kind of filter you out through the training and go, this guy, he doesn't have that ability for that, but he's good at this. Surely they must still do that, it almost seems now.
Yeah, and certainly back then, some of it was like random. There were guys who were like, oh man, I thought I was going to be a P-51 pilot, and then you're assigned to a bomber, so it's a surprise. But even for the gunners, I remember talking to one of our tail gunners who had said like they didn't have a fixed assignment at that time. They were like, okay, who wants what? And they were like, nobody wants the tail. And the one guy was like, all right, I'll do it. So some of those just came down to random choice, some of the gunner assignments.
Yeah.
But of course, I mean, you know, macabrely speaking, there's a filtration process as well, because you're losing so many guys. So you can't quite be as, you know, picky. And it's interesting to me, maybe some guys that maybe did wash out, maybe then they're sent back and they're promoted and then they become pilots or navigators because, you know, there's such a desperate need for them. And it's not that those guys were any less, you know, any less good or any less qualified. Maybe they just weren't good in one area. Do you know what I mean? And then they got this opportunity because of the turnover of guys.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
You know, and I have another question for you, Johnny, as well. I mean, it's weird. Like the guys are in this like high stress situation, and you're all playing together, and you're flying through the flak and all that. But there is a period of time when you're not flying through the flak, and there's a period of time. I don't want to use the word kind of, but you've got to fill the time somehow. Otherwise, you go crazy. You go crazy with the expectation of what's going to happen. And kind of similarly on set as well, there's a lot of time that you just hang around basically doing nothing, but you're stuck in this bloody awful ball turret thing. But was there a way that you guys coped with that? Because you're all in this big gear and you're all sweating, and you're all feeling bloody horrible, but you got a job to do. Was there a kind of like banter thing that went on? That's
the thing. I think we built it in boot camp together, spending so much time together. And the hotels we were staying in were sort of like remote golf clubs and things because with COVID going on. We were sort of out of the way. So the only thing really we had was each other. But I think we were lucky, like with the guys with Rosie's crew, we all got on so well. And I think, I don't know, I've tried to think about it after, but I think a lot of us, in terms of like who we'd work with or like past drama teachers and past drama schools and stuff, quite a lot of us link through various teachers or life experiences. A lot of us are northern. You've got a couple of Scottish lads in there, and then Liverpool, Newcastle, Sheffield, like northern lads. Things to get on with, and also because it was around COVID and because it is such a fantastic job, we were just, a lot of us just felt lucky to be there. You were just like, wow, like we get to do this. This is our job. We get to do this. So almost a lot of us didn't really want to go home. Didn't want to go back because she was like, oh, I'd rather stay. And, if we're not shooting tomorrow, I could always just stay down and then I'm here for the day after or whatever. Because you were sort of like, it became, well, it's cliche, but that band of brothers where you are literally together 24/7. And I can imagine that'd be the same for the guys when they're flying out of Thorpe Abbots, on the day off. What do? You go, I went down to Thorpe Abbots actually, and there's a pub just down the road called the Half Moon, I want to say. And there's pictures of Rosie's crew in there. And one of the stories says they came in, they moaned about the weak beer and said it didn't taste very nice, and then proceeded to drink every barrel in the pub, cleaned it out. So they moaned about it, sulked about it, yeah, and then they drank it dry, yeah. But what do you do? Because it's like you're not guaranteed tomorrow.
Yeah,
you're not guaranteed tomorrow. So what do? You go out, you drink whiskey, you dance, you talk to girls, you have a life. Like living like a rock star, and then in the morning it's scrambled eggs and you're in the tail, you're in the ball, you're out over -10 on a mission. So it was like, it's very like black and white. I can imagine their weeks were like slower because you're living hour by hour, I suppose.
Yeah.
And they were so young as well, some of like Bill's one of the things Matt sent me, one of the newspaper things, he's like 19 or something, saying to his mum, could you send me some sweets? So like you get into the head of this guy who's 19 years old looking forward to sweets from his mum. Yeah, he's having to go out and go head to head with a, Messerschmitt, very organized military air force. He's doing that on a Tuesday morning, and then back at base, asking for sweets.
Oh, that's so one thing that occurs to me, Matt, just talking to Johnny and the guys, and just these sort of like intense bursts of pressure that these guys were under, and the claustrophobia and the flak and the fact that there's nothing you can do about it and all the rest of it. Was the levels of not PTSD, but just combat fatigue higher amongst the air crew than it was amongst the ground soldiers?
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, no, I mean, there was, you're asking about the difference in PTSD with the air crews and the ground crews, or
yeah, I just wonder whether the almost like the dropout level, or the guys that were like needing to just couldn't do it anymore, was it higher amongst air crew than ground soldiers? Because in a way that they're getting, it's more of a shock, sharp shocks Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that.
I don't know what I don't know if I've seen the percentages on that, but in just reviewing so many of our files, I don't see a ton of, and there's certainly some where guys are pulled off crews, but I don't see a ton. It's not. I think for the most part, you're seeing guys that press on despite what they went through. So I definitely don't think it's a common occurrence per se in terms of.
So, I
Yeah,
guess my follow-up question is: were the levels of sort of PTSD higher when they're reliving it later on, or is it?
It's a good question. I don't know, especially because I think the military, didn't really chronicle that very well early on. But I think there are probably people that are like surprised to hear that air crews had PTSD. But like you're dealing with the same kind of things, and I think PTSD is an issue that Bill, I think, dealt with later in his life. I think Johnny captured it well by saying Bill was like a very private person. And I think he was in general, and I think he was probably because he'd gone through so much trauma. But we'll never know what Bill thought of the series, but I think Bill would certainly be pleased by what Johnny's brought to it and what he did to get it right on there. And one quick thing I'll say, because I know we're running short on time, is one thing I know Bill would be pleased with is there's one surviving tail gunner that's still alive from the 100 bomb group, a guy named Joe Urias, who's 100. And Johnny was kind enough to send Joe a birthday message for his birthday from one tail gunner to a real tail gunner. And you think about it, it's hard to put a smile on the face of a guy who's 100, and that certainly did it. So kudos to you, man.
Yeah.
Sorry, by the way, guys. I don't know what happened. I lost power.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We'll just keep going. Yeah. You didn't listen.
That's what happens in the north of England. Is you lose power every now and again.
Yeah.
I know. I lived in North Yorkshire for years.
Yeah.
I started a new segment, Johnny, on the podcast, and I trialed it out with Ian beforehand, and it's called "Shout Out to a Bully." And so what we wondered is when you see the show come out and you see how amazing it is, and you see your role in it, and you think I'm part of something absolutely incredible here. Is there anybody in your past that you thought, I hope they see this? Ian said he'd have something. I don't know. He claimed, everyone's liked him his whole life. I don't think I believed him. But...
No, I went to quite a bit of a rough school and got bullied at school for doing drama. So there's no in particular. To be honest, I've tried to you just try and do you, don't you? But yeah.
Well, it'd be good if those kids see it. Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose people who said oh, don't be an actor, it's hard, or what are you doing drama for? It's this, that and the other. I suppose it's quite nice to be one up them on that.
Yeah.
It's like a reassurance for yourself as well. If you work on something that you're proud of, or that something you've achieved, it's like a reassurance for yourself, isn't it? Like if you do go without work for a while, or if somebody says something, you think as long if you're happy with it, you're happy. For example, if something happened and I could never act again, you kind of go, well, I got to that point. So it's like that. Do you know what I mean? It's more of that rather than a look at me.
Yeah.
But yeah, when they said don't do it, I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
Shout out to you guys for listening.
Yeah. Everyone loves Ian. Everyone loves Ian. I believe him.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
Just one of those guys.
Yeah. So also as well, we subhead our podcast, The Nearly Men. And it's always around about this time in the podcast, about an hour in, although I think due to internet problems, I was in for about 20 minutes of it. I always ask people, I pray, is there something you could have nearly been? Or it could be a role that you nearly got when you nearly played, I don't know what, Spider-Man, or could you have gone a completely different way and ended up being, I don't know, a head teacher or a violinist or a masturbator? I don't know, something.
One strange one with me. I was a really good swimmer.
Oh,
I know. At school, swam at quite a good level. Won loads of swimming medals and stuff. Like I say, I'm 6'1", quite a big wingspan. But
That's a banter, eh?
yeah, other things got in the way. Like when you start with school and like sort of lost the love for it a little bit. But yeah, I always think about that. I always think, oh yeah, I wonder if I'd have. But then I once went at college. There was a guy who was a proper professional swimmer, and I thought, oh, I was a good swimmer. So I had a bit of a race with him. No chance. He was so good, so quick. So there's that, and then a role would be there was a series called The Passing Bells years ago. That was military, probably about 2014, and it was between me and Jack. He's in Slow Horses. Scottish actor, main actor. He's done really well. Forgot his name. It's doing him an injustice.
You got close.
It was between me and him, and he's had an amazing career. But I always think, oh, I wish I'd have got that.
Yeah.
I can't think of his name. Jack something. Everyone will be shouting it out. Screen. Yeah, trying to Google it now.
Jack Loudon.
Jack Loudon, yeah, he's brilliant. He was in Dunkirk as well. I think he was a Spitfire pilot with Tom Hardy. The two of them were in the plane together.
Yeah, the other guy.
Yeah, him. It was between me and him. We're both the same age, so I reckon we'd have graduated around the same time. I remember going into Spotlight and auditioning and having loads of rounds for it, and I didn't get it. And I wish I'd have got it. Turned out all right.
Yeah, I think you've done pretty well. Yeah, you've done pretty good.
So, yeah, that's an acting one.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Well, I think I'll round things out now because I think we've had you for about an hour, Johnny. We really, really appreciate your time and your stories. Very sort of like everybody that we've interviewed from the Masters of the Aircast. You're a very smart and erudite young man, and I wish you the best of luck, man. Thank you so much for coming on. Enjoy everything that's going to happen in the next few years because several times I can feel it online with our socials and our interactions that the interest in the show is growing.
Yeah.
Adding to stories and adding I'm this guy and what about this and you can feel it sort of like snowballing and they'll just keep going and in 20 time you'll be on a podcast interviewing Band of Brothers 7 cast members and talking about Masters. I promise you.
No, I hope so. I hope it. I hope you say it like you say it snowballs and hopefully brings us nice things. I remember obviously Band of Brothers, watching that. By the way, when that came out, I was not to make you feel old, chaps. I was about 9. But I rewatched it at drama school. I've watched it loads. But yeah, I was ranting there. What was I saying? Oh yeah, I remember watching it and sort of just from a believing everything. Obviously it's true, but watching it and then when I watched it from an acting point of view, you sort of go, oh yeah, and like start pointing out people that you've seen loads or these like way older, but in something different. So I was hoping that hopefully that'll happen with Masters of the Air. You look back and go, oh yeah, can remember him.
Yeah, it will, Johnny. And stay in touch with us, mate. Yeah,
we'll do. Yes, it'd be
come on our tour as well. We'll reach
out to you about that. You must
brilliant. That. It'd be nice if we could get like the Rosie crew together.
That's the plan.
Banter between the guys and stuff, and have a laugh, and it'd be nice.
That's the plan.
All right, fellas. Me. Thanks,
Johnny, and thanks, Matt, for coming on. Good to see you again, Matt.
Thanks again for Matt Maiden, 100th Bomber. Great work that you're doing. Check him out online as well. As you can tell, he's doing an amazing job, and he's helping the guys connect with the families, and he's teaching people, and he's curating the memories, and he's doing a brilliant job. Please check out the 100th Bomber Foundation. You guys take donations, Matt? Can we do that or?
Members and donations are always welcome. New members and donations are always welcome. So,
well, let's get some new members and let's get some new donations because they do great work, and he's been incredibly helpful to us. He's given us great access, and we really appreciate you, Matt. We appreciate you, Johnny. So I'll call this to an end. I'll call this meeting of minds to an end. Thank you so much. I apologize if my internet was choppy, and we will see you all again next week. Thank you so much. Bye then.